to Leadership Matters. I'm here with my partner, friend, and colleague, Liz Wiseman, and the rest of the team from the Wiseman Group. I will introduce you to them in just a second. So glad to have you with us. Today, we're going to do a conversation about leadership. Why? Because we believe leadership matters. It matters because, for the many, many reasons that you're here. One, just because it's all about bringing people's best thinking out of them, extracting that to solve hard problems. And we all love great leadership. We know the leaders who have touched our lives, and we are all grappling with wicked hard leadership problems. This last week, I was really touched by somebody who solved a hard problem. I'm wondering if some of our friends from Booz Allen Hamilton are on. I was out meeting with some of our colleagues at Booz Allen Hamilton in DC, and I went to a coffee shop, and it was interesting. We walked in; it was really well done. And I noticed that the staff was just a bit different. There was actually one fellow that was really encouraging people to make the line tighter, and I hadn't had that experience at Starbucks. And he was being persistent and making the line tighter and getting people closer. And I was with my wife Annie, and I kept noticing these different behaviors until she tapped on my shoulder and she said, "John, all of the people that are running this coffee shop seem like that they have some kind of a learning disability." And as I looked around, I noticed these hats and these mugs like this one, not broken. And it turns out that Betty and Bo's, this coffee shop, was started by a family who had several kids that had learning or mental disabilities. And they thought, these kids are underutilized, but they have so much to offer. So they started this coffee shop, and it's 100% completely staffed and operated from some people that otherwise are just written off, where people just assume that they don't have anything to offer. Oh, it was so touching to me. Of course, I got the hat and the beanie, and it made me just think about this concept of leadership and what we're all up against.
Wait a minute, Shawn. Is that the talk you did at Booz Allen Hamilton, where we heard and maybe saw a video clip that you broke out in Vanilla Ice?
No, it wasn't.
Ice Baby.
That was a different one. They talked me into doing a really embarrassing Vanilla Ice dance from my 7th grade years on stage in front of too many people. But this was different. This was with a smaller group of leaders, and I wasn't willing to do it twice. It was a little too humiliating. But yes, this same group, and so this just back to this idea of Betty and Bo's. We are faced with terribly tough leadership challenges. And we need leaders that have the ability to see intelligence and capability where otherwise it's completely left untapped. This is just one example. That's just not inclusivity. That's using people's capability regardless of the challenges that they have. Well, that's the kind of problems that we're about solving with you today. We've asked you some questions. You've submitted questions to us. We built a show today around those questions. But first, let me introduce our team. So we have producing our show today. Head of marketing is Austin. He's on. We're so glad to have him here with us. He's making it all work today. Plus, we have our resident thinker, expert, and nerd, Lauren, who will be coming on several times to, make sure that Liz and I are in line with the facts, and also just providing the color of what people are thinking today. And of course, I'm here with my wonderful and very fun and very smart companion, Liz. Here's what we're going to do today. I'm Shawn Vanderhoven. If you don't know me, I'm so glad to be with you. Here's how the show's going to work. We're going to start with a little bit of a State of the Union on the topic. We took the topic from your questions, which Liz is getting ready to introduce. We're going to share a little bit about what's going on in the world on that topic, and then we're going to take 2 questions that were challenges that really stuck out to us and the questions that you submitted to us. And then we're going to get to the final question, which will be a live question, and it doesn't have to be in line with our topic. It can be any leadership matter that you are struggling with today. You can phrase it in a question. We'll have many people phrase questions. We'll select one with a little challenge between Liz and I to see who gets to pick, and then we'll dive into that final one. So glad to be with you. Liz, tell us about our topic.
Well, when Shawn, you sent me the questions, as I looked at them, it just became abundantly clear that the challenges that were represented in these questions were really about trust, and they were issues of trust and situations where there might be a lack of trust and the need to rebuild trust, really where trust was in question. And so rather than just jump into the questions, we want to pull back a little bit and just look at the issue of trust and how it affects how we lead and how we contribute and how we make an impact. And, we're going to try, Shawn and I are going to try our best as we tackle these leadership matters that you bring to us to kind of zoom out and look at the big context, zoom in and look at appropriate action, like step back, think it through, look at the past, look at what's the right action going forward, what might go wrong going forward, and really look at these from every perspective we can. Perspective taking is really important to us. It's one of the really master skills of impact players is the ability not just to take action, but to step back and say, what is happening around me? And Shawn, I was thinking about this, like this is one of my favorite topics of inquiry, and I just value so much people who can see things through multiple perspectives. And I was just reminded of this just the other day. I was driving through a neighborhood, and it was a neighborhood that I often go running in. It's kind of a wooded residential neighborhood, and several years ago I'm out running in this neighborhood, and I'm coming off of a little side street.
You're traveling or you're home?
No, I'm at home. This is home turf. And it's a street I run on a lot, and I'm coming off of a side residential street onto a little bit of a busier residential street. And there's a big garbage truck, and it's taken up a whole bunch of this street. And so traffic has kind of come to a standstill. Like I stop, the cars stop. They're kind of like lining up a little bit. And when it's clear that the garbage truck is like moving forward, I start my run, because if I stop running,
yeah,
that might be the end of the run.
You and me both.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, no, I got to kind of keep this up. And I'm like on this pace and I'm running. And as I'm going to kind of go back out, where I was intending to turn onto the street, this car just like gives me the straight arm, like kind of just looks at me like, no. And I'm like, oh, he's being quite assertive about his position in like the queue of cars. Like
you're running, he's in a car, and he's
wanting to go before me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, I'm just a little runner. I'm just gonna like go, around this truck, and I'm just gonna keep running. There's gonna be room for both of us. It's not a problem. Couldn't figure out why he was so adamant. And I'm like, okay, and he went, he keeps waiting. And then I see, zoom, a car come racing by that I couldn't see because of the garbage truck that's blocking it. And I thought he was preventing me from moving forward on my run. And what I saw is he was saving my life, that he could see something from his vantage point that I couldn't see. And this experience is so deeply emblazoned into my mind, which is before we jump in and just act on things that seem perfectly logical and reasonable, let's just stop and say, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think the best leaders do this. They stop and go, okay, wait a minute. I know I want to get this done, but what's the history?
Yeah.
What's the context? What's the larger context that people are bringing into the workplace? So we're going to dig in a little bit on trust and what is the state of trust. Lauren and I had a fun time kind of digging into this. And, the state of trust in a word is like it's on a decline. So if we kind of look at the headlines on what is happening with trust sort of in society, in the workplace, is trust in institutions is at a historic low. I think a lot of people know that, they feel that, they see that, but it's not just a mistrust of government institutions or big media. This is, declining trust in schools, in local organizations, in churches. Like we kind of have this growing skepticism of organizations. We also see a growing decline in trust in tech. And it's not just big tech, it's also like small tech, but in some ways it's any tech. Things like social media and data privacy and issues of AI, I think are making us a little suspicious of like the people who control the information in the world and who control our information. Trust in communities is down as well, not just big institutions, but also human interaction, trusting of like neighbors and others. And, some of this is giving rise to some trends of authoritarianism, and that is up around the world. Um, before we even jump into what does this mean in the workplace, I want to go to Lauren. We're going to phone a nerd.
Let's do it.
And Lauren, I would love to have you just give us like your 5 best data points on like what is the context that managers are working in with regard to trust in institutions, because most managers are working in some sort of institution.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, what have you got for us?
That's all right, Liz. Trust is on the decline. Gallup has been polling American adults about trust since 1979, and their 2023 poll numbers show that confidence in institutions is at an all-time low. And like you said, it's across the board, it's all institutions. But some of our very least trusted institutions include news media, the criminal justice system, and coming in at the very bottom, only 8% of American adults say that they trust Congress. And luckily, in the workplace, bosses and coworkers fare a lot better than Congress, but trust is still on the decline there as well. 1 in 3 people say that they don't trust their boss, and 1 in 4 say that they don't trust their coworkers. But
Wow.
maybe even more interesting to me is
Wow. Like we just paused. Like 1 in 3 don't trust their boss, and 1 in 4 don't trust their coworkers. Okay, this is really important context.
And there's a perception gap there as well. Leaders tend to vastly overestimate by like 20 to 50% how much their employees trust them. They see themselves as trustworthy, and they don't see that they're not being trusted. Mm-hmm. And this hits even closer to home. Like you said, in communities, religious groups, families, 61% of people say that they trust their local community. 63% say they trust their neighbors. So that means about 40% of American adults don't trust their community and their neighbors. And most of the numbers I've been referencing here come from survey data, where pollsters have just very directly asked people, do you trust these groups of people? But it's actually not just stated trust that is low. Recent work has shown that stated trust is highly correlated with like experimentally demonstrated trust through transactions. So in other words, it's not just that people are less trusting of abstract groups or organizations. There's actually really good reason to believe, good data behind the belief that people are actually materially less willing to trust other individuals with whom they interact.
Okay, Lauren, thank you for that very depressing report on trust. And I think
I'm here for you.
Lauren's bringing us down, Shawn. You're gonna have to bring us back up. Maybe some vanilla ice baby dancing. But I think it's really important context to understand that like this larger trend towards skepticism of organizations and people who control our data, our destiny, our laws, our communities, like people don't leave that at the door when they walk into work. Like this is part of this mindset that we bring into the workplace. And knowing this, I think really helps us understand like how do we create an environment where people can do really impactful work. Like this is the backdrop that we're working in. I think trust is also at the very core of our work. Now, I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago. I don't think I saw it 10 years ago. And it was not too long after the book Multipliers had come out, and I was at a family gathering, and my mom was there. Now, my mom had not only read the book in its entirety before it came out, she had copy edited for me. I didn't realize publishers copy edit for you. Like I kind of knew it, but I didn't want to give them something messy. I wanted to give them something clean. So my mom had poured over this manuscript with me, and we're at this party, and I hear her say, "Oh, if I could describe Elizabeth's book in one word," she calls me Elizabeth still. She said, "I would say the word is trust." And I'm like, "What?" Like, no, this is a book about intelligence and how managers use intelligence. And I could see someone maybe saying engagement or empowerment or brilliance is this word, but she said trust. And then I started to see like leading like a multiplier is all about trust. And that trust really does change everything. And, a lot of the classic literature on trust is about what managers can do to get people to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think multipliers does is asks managers, like, are you operating in a way that demonstrates that you trust other people? Like, people will do their best work, not just when they trust their manager, but when they feel trusted.
Yeah, there's something in this idea too about that if we have lower trust in general as people, you can say that it's better to be a cynic than it is to be naive, because this is an upgrade. It's not good to be naive because then you're vulnerable in all sorts of ways, and you can't contribute in ways
like
that are
people
meaningful.
trust me. I'm a good person.
That's this, and so
diminishing.
So cynicism, when you realize that things aren't the way they appear, that you can't really trust in people in the way that maybe you wish that you could. What you want is to create an environment where people can jump from cynicism to maybe contend, to really be fully utilized, to be able to offer up their capability. And that's, I think, what this does when you lead in a way where it draws people's capability in, where you're giving them a space to be able to do it and they can trust that space. It actually gives them the ability to jump from the cynicism that's kind of like native right now, that's almost being bred in these low trust environments. As we're trying to help people step into work and to be able to jump into a trusting environment, you need this style of leadership.
Absolutely. And so I think multipliers ask this question of, like, are you demonstrating that you trust people? Are you creating an environment of trust, of mutual trust? And then when I look at impact players, impact players ask this question of, what is it that people are doing that causes them to do extraordinary, valuable work? And why is it that some people get entrusted with the big opportunities, the big responsibilities? Like, why do you hand the ball off to certain people in moments that matter? This is fundamentally
so you trust them.
An issue of trust. And so, in our questions today, we're going to look at, how do leaders build trust on their team? And also, how do you build some upward trust so that people will hand you the ball in moments that matter? If there were a question that, like, Shawn and I would invite everyone to be thinking about in our time together, it's really this question of, am I trusted? And it could be, am I trusted as a leader of the team? Am I trusted as a contributor? Am I trusted? And if not, why not?
Let's do that then. Throw into chat, how do you know when you're trusted? And let's take a look. To hear from all of you, I'm just going to go ahead and grab my iPad here because I've got your chat screen.
And what
here.
are the indicators that you're trusted? So not like, are you trusted?
How do you know? What are the indicators to know that you are trusted? Let's see what people say.
And I would love to see people maybe first look at this from a leadership perspective. Like, when you are leading a team, how do you know that people trust you? This probably has nothing to do with how they treat you, because we tend to treat our bosses nice, at least on the surface. But, like, how do you know you're trusted? And then maybe we'll get some of those going, and then you might look at this question from the other perspective, which is when you're handed an opportunity and a piece of work, how do you know you're being trusted in that moment?
Yeah.
Like, what are the indications?
Yeah. Well, let's see what we have here. So right off the bat, I love this idea that you're included in the important decisions. That's one way that you know that you're trusted. And that there's transparency in this. You know that, I think that that's true. And if you think about this, the time that you know that...
Shawn, I have to stop you because these chats are great, but I have to just thank John and Michelle, who both were like, thank you, Lauren. 3 exclamation points.
Yeah.
Michelle, appreciate you, Lauren. And I love this because, one, we all love to be appreciated, but I love working with Lauren so much. I so appreciate all this brilliance she brings to her team. That just made me super happy.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I love that. No, I was going to say
back to what we're seeing in chat.
So I was just thinking about a time in my career when I really knew that I was trusted, and it was this time where I was working with a leader that, and the very beginning of the of my experience with this leader, there was little context ever provided for the situations that we were in. And I remember recognizing when he would pull me aside and start to lay down some of the background conversation, what was really being said. And I remember going, oh, like, he's starting to trust me, because we went from this place to where I was always working with, just a fraction of the puzzle. But then all of a sudden he started giving me these puzzle pieces and this idea of transparency with what's happening, what's really happening, is a definite sign of trust.
Yeah, when they let you in, I think one of the signs that people trust you is that they're willing to take a short-term hit.
Yeah.
Like to sign up for an ugly piece of work or to kind of take a step back with you in order to take a step forward later.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a little bit of kind of the marshmallow test of
Mm-hmm.
like, I trust you that if I make this little sacrifice and maybe do an ugly piece of work, you're going to give me a pretty piece of work
Yeah.
later. Okay, what else are we seeing?
Let's see here.
Given important and critical work projects, they bring their challenges freely and openly. And that's what you said, when there's that transparency there, when they're looking to build a true partnership, respect for making important decisions. Okay. Oh, we've got so many of them here.
I like with this idea, Rob. Oh, it's good to have Rob out here. He's one of our master practitioners. Oh. He says that you have the latitude to approach problems with minimal oversight. Oh, isn't this the truth? You know, when you've got like real free reign, when you're on a leash. Oh, I was at this. We were meeting with these folks from Adobe. I was very nervous. I just kind of like started in this kind of world of like research and leadership development. And we were going to meet with this leader, and we had a dinner appointment, lunch appointment. We were on our way driving down, and the whole way down, the leader that I was with lectured me on all the things that I shouldn't say. And that I would look really bad if I said any of these things.
Oh my gosh, that would make me
so
say those because I was obsessing with this.
You fill in the blank. Mad lib with me here. What happened when I was there?
You did all those things. There's so much research on this that say
all I could do was think about those things.
Not to do about things like we put our focus there and we do them.
I did those things. And then afterwards, on the ride back, he told me all the reasons why I did all the things that I wasn't supposed to do. And I just honestly, like, I just wanted to, I couldn't tell if I wanted to like punch him or cry, but it was this experience where I thought, oh, I don't ever get these things wrong.
You know, I want to phone a nerd here spontaneously. Lauren, this one's a bit of a surprise, but I know you've dug into a little bit of the research of what happens when people are monitored and watched. Like and we're seeing this more as companies move towards remote work. Companies are putting in like the laptop scans, tracking people's keystrokes and behaviors. Like what happens when people are not given latitude to approach problems, as Rob says. Okay, Lauren, you're on it. I can see you're already ready to go. What you got for us?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. One study found that monitoring workers, like putting software on computers to monitor all of their activities, made them significantly more likely to kind of find loopholes and break rules, to take unscheduled breaks, to like purposely take a really long time on tasks. And these particular researchers who were digging into it, their theory at least was that when we take out that element of agency for people at work, it kind of releases them of responsibility. They feel free to sort of check their morals at the door. It's a little bit of like if you don't trust me to do my job, then I guess I won't. I'll find loopholes and I'll game the system instead.
And Lauren, thank you for that, because it's so congruent with what we find with diminishing, is that when we are micromanaging and like overbearing, we are projecting these messages of I don't trust you, and it tends to be self-fulfilling because people clam up, they do the very thing they're not supposed to do, they check their agency at the door. So like one of the things that we want people to think about is like, am I trusted by my team, but also am I projecting trust? Is not just my words like I trust you, is my behavior telegraphing I trust you, I think you're going to do a good job, I don't need to monitor you. Like that would be a last resort. Okay, we've got a lot of great insights on this, but again, we're going to dig into these 3 questions.
Let's start with the first
kind
challenge.
Of about trust.
So let's start with the first challenge. And thanks, John, if you're on. You'll know if this is your question. Raise your hand. We really appreciate it. But here is the first question. We'll put it up on the screen. I've been working for an accidental diminisher team leader who has recently received a promotion within the organization, will be transferring out of our team. I've been asked to take over his position as team leader. We're a team of 6. What are the first steps I can take towards getting the trust of the team and restoring balance to the team? Thanks, John, if you're on. This question is interesting to us because, well, first of all, it's really common when you're stepping into a trust vacuum. Well, let's look back. So we're going to take a look back before we kind of look forward as we explore this and then figure out what can you do now. When you think back into the situation, and there's a question here, and that is like, what contributed to this? So Liz, you've obviously spent loads of time doing this. Like what's the best way to approach like sniffing out what's happened so you really have like a good handle on the situation?
Well, I think it's like really looking into the history and looking into the way that history with leaders can create imprints in people. And that, essentially it's looking at how a leader's presence is felt long after that leader leaves office or leaves the group. Now, I think the question that, so, this is someone who probably has clear, and this is Michael or
It's John.
John, I'm sorry. John, like, is coming in this and probably saying, okay, I want to be a great leader here. I want to be a multiplier kind of leader. I want to create an environment where people can do their best work. But it's worth stopping and saying, what are all the learned behaviors that this group, like, what am I inheriting? So here's the question, and we want to put this on chat. With this assumption that a diminisher's presence is felt for a long time, that it doesn't snap, people don't snap out of it when the diminisher leaves.
Yeah, it takes years.
Years.
As I think about post-diminisher, I'm worried about being diminished for years.
For years to come, it erodes trust in organization. You're coming into a place where people don't necessarily trust the leader, and they have not been trusted for a long time. That leader has been messaging, you're going to screw it up. I don't trust you. I can't give you the big work. So the question is on chat, what does working for a diminisher do to you? Because I think before, John steps into this, you have to think about what is the learned behavior on this team. Because if you come in, boom, blazing like a multiplier, you might actually make the situation a lot worse. Because there's going to be some like shock. It's probably a little bit like, I don't know, is there something where like you've got hot molten glass and if you put it in cold water too fast, it's going to shatter? There's something probably about that. But okay, I'm seeing things come in. John,
let's let
what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, one of the things for sure that's a theme in what we have here is you immediately start looking in the mirror. I think most people do. Oh my gosh, like you start doubting yourself. There's a loss of confidence. It's sapping inspiration. It makes you set up your own firm, which I love that, Kathy. I'm wondering if you did that as a result of your diminishing boss. But I think there's something interesting about this theme here that I see, and that is the power of that lens of how you start looking at yourself with doubt.
You do. You look at yourself with doubt, and as Rob said, you start to take the safe road. For those of you who are familiar with the ideas in impact players, I think you start seeing the world through a threat lens rather than an opportunity lens. You're looking at everything of, how is this going to go wrong? How am I going to get hurt by this? Like, I touched that stove before and it was hot. You're probably riddled with self-doubt. So confidence is down. Initiative is down. There's a learned helplessness. Because when a rescuer comes in or a micromanager comes in, you learn to just say, I don't have to get it done. Or, hey, boss, what should I do about this? You're going to see apathy, anger, resentment. You're going to get a group that is probably in a state of exhaustion. You're going to see burnout. And you're going to see a group that is weakened. So, the dilemma here is if you come in big with like a multiplier propensity, you're going to ask questions, issue big challenges, you're going to play fewer chips, and what you're going to get?
It's crickets.
Crickets.
Yep.
You're going to get crickets. And so, it's about thinking about, how do you rebuild trust? How do you build strength? Like maybe even it's kind of seeing that this is a group of people who are capable and so strong, but right now it's like they've had a cast on both legs and both arms, and they're weakened by this situation. So let's talk about what should you do. Is there anything else that looking back or looking at the context or around the corners, around the garbage trucks to see the speeding cars?
Well, I think it plays into this, like, as we even think about what are options on how you look back. I was just thinking about this last week, meeting with some leaders who were in a similar circumstance, and there was a leader who approached me after a discussion that we had, which was in this vein, and there's if people have been in a diminishing environment, you have to name it with them, not once, not twice, but many times. Like, okay, what was the diminishing that was going on? I mean, maybe the easiest model, and one of the things we'll do as a result of today's show is there's a little slide deck that we found to be valuable for leaders. We call it the discussion slides, and it's just each of the accidental diminishing tendencies. What's the intention? What's the outcome? And then what could maybe you do about it? But the idea is if you share it with your team and then talk about within the team, first as a leader, what accidental diminishing tendencies do you see in me? Then all of a sudden you start to get that language in the team, and language gives the utility to grab it, to actually start talking about it.
It's one of my favorite reactions to the Multipliers book when people read it and they're like, oh, not just that's what I've been doing as a leader that's diminishing. People are like, oh, I was working for a diminisher. No wonder I thought I was worthless or incapable. And naming it allows people to process that and realize that they're actually capable of doing a lot more than that.
So now you can name it with the language in the team, and then you can talk about it. And that gives people a chance to be able to express the violations. And if you can do that consistently over time for a little bit, as you're calibrating the challenge and trying to get momentum in the new direction, really, using people's intelligence while you're on that path of kind of calibrating your multiplier propensities, you said, to get people's best thinking, it gives people a chance to kind of name it and to talk about it. And the more that you do that, the more you can understand how people were diminished through their eyes. And that gives you the chance to be able to figure out how you'll work directly with that individual to be able to challenge them in a way that will really work for them. So for example, if somebody felt like that they were constantly being rescued, well, you know that you need to give them a little bit more space.
Yes. And I think it's important, right, to name it, to talk about it, but that fine line to walk is how do you do that in a way that is not bad-mouthing the previous manager, like, oh, your previous boss was a jerk. I mean, people already know that. I don't think you need to name it, but how do you show respect for the previous
So
leader?
It'd be inappropriate if I went to the board and drew like a little devil figure with their name above it and said like diminisher or on conference room walls. Not good.
Well, only if you then walked in and you they're wearing a halo, like gold tinsel, then it would certainly be appropriate. Okay, so let's talk about what to do. I think the principle behind this is that trust, like once violated, and here's what's so unfair about this is you're coming in and you weren't the one who has created that, but you now have to earn trust slowly. And it's going to go against all the tendency to want to come in big, like I'm a leader that's going to save this team and I'm going to make this better for everyone. You've got to earn trust, and trust is lost so quickly, but it is regained slowly in little slivers and slices.
Yeah, trust is lost in an instant, but it's built over time.
Little little almond slices, just little slivers moving forward. Here are a few things that you might want to try to do. So I want to go into some of the multiplier practices and look at how do you do this in a small slice, and how do you do this with a modification, knowing that you're working with a group that has been historically diminished. Okay, so the intuitive thing here is to want to get people to trust you, and to tell them you can trust me. I think what you want to do instead is to do more work signaling and talking about your intentions. Hey, I'm going to ask you to get involved in this. I'm doing this because I think you have a lot to offer, and I'm going to ask you to take the lead on it because I think, and so rather than I'm doing this to catch you or as a quiz, more and more you need to talk about your intentions for them rather than asking people to trust you. I think that for starter. Now,
well, actually, you don't want to ask them to trust you. Maybe
Never ever.
Ever. Because if you can get it right to where you share your intentions and they have good experiences negotiating and working with you to accomplish those intentions, the trust just naturally
Well,
starts.
I have to admit, anytime someone asks me to trust them, I instantly assume that they're not trustworthy. It's kind of like when you say, well, to be honest, well, are you not
What do
normally?
you think about lying here? Yeah.
Like, what is your normal default? Okay, so here, what you want to do is you want to help them build their capability. You're strengthening muscles. Think of your role here as a physical therapist, and someone has come out of double cast and they've got weakened muscles but lots of potential. Like, how do you give them exercises where they can rebuild that muscle a little bit at a time? So one thing you might want to start with is, instead of giving people big challenges to signal, I think you can do big things here, give people little challenges. Right side those challenges. Now, I have to admit, I had an experience I'm not super proud of for lots of reasons. It was very much a time when I was a diminisher, and but it was kind of a special situation because I am working with my mother. And we are co-authoring the Multiplier Effect book, which is looking at the multiplier leadership in schools. And so I invite my mom to work with me on this. My mom is fabulous, brilliant, talented, dependable, all those kind of things. She's a former principal, and we're like, hey, Mom, we're gonna write this book together. We start this project. And I'm like, hey, man, my mom is amazing. And so I give her all these big things to do. I've called her out of retirement to do this project. And we're a few months into this, and my mom is like telling me, I'm sorry, I can't do that because like my hands are shaking. I'm like terrified. And I had given her, like, pulled her into this book and research world and given her these big things, thinking I was expressing my confidence in her. And it actually had the opposite effect. And so when I realized, okay, I have now had a diminishing effect on my mother while we're writing a book on being a multiplier. So you can't get a whole lot worse than this.
Yeah.
This is one of my low points as a leader. So then I do this dumb thing about expressing all my confidence in her.
Oh.
Hey, Mom, you got it. You got it. All this. And this is what she said to me. She said, Elizabeth, you can't give me confidence. Only I can give me confidence. And what she was saying is, it's got to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, whoa, slow down. And instead of giving her big things and cheerleading her, I gave her small things, which went against all of my intuition. Because I'm like, oh, that seems like I'm saying.
Yeah, because what she needs is the small wins.
She needed small wins.
Yeah.
And so we start thin slicing it. And I'm like, oh, here, why don't you take this? And she does that. And then bigger and bigger. And then she's back. Yeah. She's back to her full self. So I think if you're in this situation, I would think very, very carefully about, how do you right size the challenge? How do you do something that's just a size too big?
Yeah.
Maybe even this is a chance to say, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And this might be a chance to say, you know what, I'd love to have you set the dial on the challenge. It might be a good place to ask questions like, what's the challenge you wish someone were asking you? What is the thing that you want to do? What would make you kind of a little bit nervous, but totally excited?
Yep, right.
So let them dial that in. If you're going to go big with, like, let me ask questions and solicit people's thinking, I would modify that with, send those questions out a day, a two.
Give them space. Give them time to think.
So people can come prepared. They don't feel called on the carpet. They don't feel a gotcha. You might go, come out big on, I'm going to give them 51% of the vote. Well, that's terrifying if you've had a diminishing leader. You might say, hey, what percentage of the lead do you want on this?
There's this theme in here, which is, how do I understand what's happened and how do I rebuild with pace? Like, where I'm thinking through this, not in a transaction, not in a talk, not in a rev up, but like, how can I help rebuild people's confidence in themselves and the situation, and therefore by default in you, but that's not the lead, to then get them into a place where now we've replaced this kind of like deficit that's been produced by all of this diminishing, and now we've got genuine confidence because people have been utilized in a way that was meaningful to them.
And I think the key word in what you said, Shawn, is meaningful to them. And so it's moving away from, gee, I want people to trust me,
Mm-hmm.
to I need to let people know that I trust them. And maybe even more important is I need to create experiences so that people trust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like creating these wins that are meaningful to them.
Yeah.
And then I think if, we topped this off with just maybe something else to be mindful of, this is a great situation where it's important to constantly signal not just your intentions, but signal your actions. Now, it's like going to a good Zumba class, or for those of you who do Peloton, like a good instructor will tell you what's coming next. Like they might give you an overview of, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a few really steep hills, and then we're going to do some speed work. And they're like, okay, in 10 minutes, we're then going to start we're going to get our weights out. And so, okay, I know what's coming. And they also say, oh, and you're going to get a little relief here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good place to tell people constantly what you're doing and why you're doing, not self-obsessing, but just so they trust the moves that you're making as a leader.
I love it. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We've got a decision that we've got to make. You're gonna help us make this decision. We don't have time to do our second challenge question, which is about if your leaders, how can you manage up in a way where you are trusted, especially if your leader's not reciprocating or responding well to your advances to step up and play bigger. We can take on this challenge, or
I think we can do it.
Or we've got 15 minutes left. We could take a unprepared question live from the audience, which would give us the ability to do that really well.
Can we show the second question?
Let's show the second question so you all can think about it. And then let us know in chat if you want to dive into this question, because Liz and I have prepared to chat about this. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to rob the opportunity for somebody who has a question today that we haven't discussed to just get a live one and go after it. But here it is, challenge 2. We're reversing the lens now. It's looking at this from a contributor's perspective. What are some of the tactics and pitfalls regarding being an impact player and managing up? Actually, let me get this here because I'm missing. Here it is. Manage up. The inspiration to make an impact is obvious, but when supervisor leadership isn't as receptive as we would like, what are some simple tenets of managing up? So the question that I have, and you can have a big vote here, Liz,
I'm going to go with the group.
Do you want to go with this challenge, or do you want to take the unprepared challenge? Somebody's got a burning question. Throw it into chat. What is your preference? Do you want to take one live, or do you want to go with this question? Let's see what we've got here.
And did you see Keith says, Lauren, you rock?
Yeah, I do
see that. I just love this. I love that people are loving on Lauren so much.
Okay, we've got 2 votes for challenge 2. Love challenge 2. If somebody doesn't really quick change the trend, we're going to jump in there for the rest of our time.
2 for 2. 2 for 2. We're going to wait. Oh, and Ashley said challenge. Do the challenge.
Okay, you know what? We're going to do the challenge. Okay, here it is. Let's talk about looking back. How do you just start to try to get perspective and assess the situation? Your boss isn't taking your advances.
Are you not wearing shoes, Shawn?
I'm not. I'm actually wearing Monster Inc. socks.
Those are evil horn socks.
Yeah,
right
but that's
I know he's cute. Okay, let's jump into this. So I love this question. The question is, look, he's hiding his socks and you show your socks with pride, you weirdo. So I love this question. What are some simple tenets of managing up? And, Impact Players is looking at what is it that contributors do that's causing extraordinary value. But I think it has a lot to do with how their leaders see them and trust them. And it's really asking the question, are you trusted? I put together 5 simple tenets of managing up. Number 1 is managing up is about building trust. It's not about negotiation. It's not about manipulation. It's not about politics. It's really about, are you building a trusting relationship? If we want to, and I guess maybe this is one of the tenets, is if we want to be trusted, we have to trust the people who we want to be entrusted with work. So it's about building up. And when we build that trusting relationship, we get entrusted with the most important work. Now, the second tenet would be that I think most managers don't like managing people.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the fun conclusions of doing the research behind impact players. Now, in this, we asked, and I think we have a slide with this on it, we asked 170 managers in great organizations, like, what is it that people do that makes your job delightful? Like, that makes being a leader rewarding and easy and fulfilling and all of this. And you'll see on the screen here 15 credibility builders. And what I would love to ask people to do is, if you look at this, this is like stuff managers love that people do. And when we do them, we are building credibility. Credibility is trust. So the question is on chat, what really is on that list?
Yeah.
Now, I've gone back
like
and
reading between the lines, you mean? Like as you read through this, like, do you mean, is that what you mean?
Fundamentally
Like,
at the core of
yeah,
this?
what's the core of this list?
Now, I went through yesterday and started to look at this, and I'm like, I think I can sum that list up in about 4 things, and I'm a little embarrassed because I probably should have done that before I wrote the book. Like, I probably should have shortened down that list, but let's see.
But the list was awesome. It was hard to shorten that list.
Well, I mean, that's shortening it from 170 things.
Because it's so fun anyways to look through those, because we all just say yes when we read through these.
Well, I'm not saying anything yet on chat about how someone would like sum that up, but I'll give you kind of what I think is at the core of that. What managers really want people to do is, number one, they want them to manage themselves. They don't want to have to say, here's a piece of work, I need you to do it. They want people to do things without being asked, to anticipate problems, to have a plan, to figure it out yourself, to get the job done without me coming back. Like, managers, I mean, a lot of people don't like managers. Managers don't even like managers. Like, managers generally don't like managing. Now, caveat, that doesn't mean that your manager doesn't like micromanaging. There are a few that do. I think managers want people who learn fast. We see here, they love it when people ask for feedback, admit mistakes, are willing to change, to pivot, to adapt. They want people to use their time well. The manager's time well, like, you know, get to the point, tell it to me straight, come prepared, like, trust me with the reality. And they want people to be a good team player.
It reminds me of, I remember learning this lesson in a way that I wouldn't have expected on what maybe my managers were wanting from me in the future. I was a young sales dude. And I actually think that sales can be a great opportunity for anybody to kind of figure out like how relationships work, because in the end we're always just, you know, in a way selling. But I was responding to a bunch of bids through a website where they would post requirements. So they would put out these specs for systems that they wanted, and then I would respond to these specs, and I was winning 0. I'm not talking like win 1 in 10, like submit 100 proposals, get 0 wins. And then I decided, well, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe I need to try to find people that I could talk to find out what they want. Maybe I need to be the one writing these specs, which was my hunch. But that's not how I figured it out. It was because I got on the phone one day and I was talking to this fellow named Clarence Osborne at the Veterans Medical Center in Birmingham, Alabama. And I listened to him for about an hour and a half, summarizing what were the things that he wanted in the system. And then I went and took and figured out the 3 things that had in common. And I came back and said, Clarence, do you want this? And he's like, well, that's not exactly what I said to you, but that's what I want. I will buy the system from you. And then I sold the system. It was my very first sale. And I remember thinking, yeah, what the world needs from me is to figure out what their problem is and say it to them in a way that's easier for them to understand, and then provide a solution. And then as I started to work for leaders, I realized, well, that's what my managers needed from me. They needed for me to figure out what the problems were that they were thinking about at night, that they were really wrestling with, and figure out how I could use my capability to help them solve that problem.
And it is such this tenet of managing up is letting your manager know, I understand your problem. I understand what's important. And if we make ourselves easy to manage, then people don't have to manage us. We get to self-manage. And that was one of the comments we saw. Nate said self-leadership is what really is at the core there. It's like, if we're easy to manage, then our manager doesn't have to manage us. Our manager can lead us. And most people don't like managers, but they love good leaders. And you talked about that, like your experience at that coffee shop where you're like, I see good leadership in action. And then I think here is what I think maybe is one of the most important tenets of managing up is and building trust with your boss, with your stakeholders, with your client at the Veterans Administration in Birmingham, Alabama.
Birmingham, Alabama, yeah.
Is that you have to prove first that you can be trusted with the basics before being entrusted with the most valuable work. I see people make this mistake all the time. They're like, I want to work on not just the glamorous stuff, but the important stuff, like put me in, coach.
Right.
But they don't realize that destination involves a connecting flight.
Yep.
Like, you know what? If you're trying to get to Birmingham, Alabama, you got to go through Denver. And so you've got to show that you can get yourself to Denver before they're going to put you on that flight to Alabama. And so if you can show, like, I can be trusted to do like the quotidian work, the basics, like you can trust my competence, you can trust my understanding that I get what's important. And when you get that trust built of like, oh, wow, this person is everything I give them, they do a great job, you're going to get bigger and bigger jobs. And then I think the last tenet I would add to just managing up and how to do it well is that it's not about this imbalanced relationship, that even in our relationships with our bosses, we have so much more control and power than we think we have. You know, it's often think, oh, this is my boss. I'm like, you know, I'm a victim of their whims of what they ask me to do. But I think we can take control of that situation. And that's what managing up is. You know, it might be that we do more to tell our boss, here's what I need from you so that I can do great work from you. And it's a question that I use when I'm finding myself, not a question, a statement, but when I'm like put in a little box, sometimes hired to come in and do a job, but then micromanage so much I can't do a great job. And what I'll have to stop and reset and say, here's the job I want to do for you. Like, I want to do a brilliant piece of work for you, and I'm going to. That's giving them the performance guarantee. But here's what I need from you for me to be able to do that. So it's taking control of that situation.
Let's take the front part of this question, which is fun, which was, you know, and you hit this with the list, but let's just see about some ones that are common. What are some pitfalls regarding managing up? I know we had some of those, but let's talk about some of the ones that
what do you see?
It's pretty easy to fall into. Like when you were talking earlier, one of the things that I thought about how sometimes we assume that, you know, what the real agenda is or what the boss's real goals are is going to be given to us clearly, you know, in a prioritized document with a bow on it.
My experience is it rarely comes that way.
Yeah. And so this is a pitfall, this assumption that the world should be clear to me and that I should be given clear tasks. And a lot of times I think in managers' defense, because, you know, the research that I've been working on the last couple of years, one of the things that people say is the most distracting for them to be able to do their best thinking is when nothing's clear. But as you really look into it from a manager's perspective, is nothing's clear for them either. They're not getting really clear messages on which priorities that they need to be. I mean, they're in the exact same position that you are. And so it's difficult.
Particularly if they're in middle management.
Even worse. It's kind of like the worst place to be in when you're in middle management, because you have to, you know, well, you have to do both things. You've got to contribute and manage and decipher and do ESP on what your boss wants and what's changing for them. So oftentimes they're in a situation where they're not naturally good at translating the chaos into order for you. So they actually really need for you to work on that same skill of translating this chaos into order to figure out how to help them win. So I think this is one really common way that sometimes we can, you know, we hope that the world will come to us in a way that it's easy to have impact, but oftentimes we have to do a lot of this thinking to figure out what's the real agenda.
You know, maybe another pitfall is the favorite child pitfall, which is like, okay, the way to manage up is for me to be the superstar of the team and the favorite child. And, you know, what we heard over and over from managers is what they want are people who are willing to play on the team. They want the person who's not like, okay, I'm the good kid. Everyone else is a screw up. They want someone who's like, oh, I can see, like, mom, dad, you're trying to get the brood out the door. Let me help
Yeah.
my little, sister get her coat on.
Yeah.
That's what that looks like. They want that harmony built on their team, making their job easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that is one of the tenets. The more you can make that person's job easier,
Mm.
the more they're going to trust you.
Yeah. Well, who, if you've had anybody work for you that made your job easier, can you think of a time where you didn't trust them?
No, we trust people who make our jobs easier.
Yeah. We go
trust
back to the people.
companies.
Companies, services, we go back to the people that make it easy.
Make it easy. Make my software easy to use. Make this process easy. Okay, Shawn, I think we might have time for one more question. Is that pushing it?
Well,
'Cause
we
this
have
last
2
one,
minutes.
It's kind of a pretty straightforward question.
do it.
I'd love
Yep.
to tackle it. Maybe next time we'll take a live question and we'll Rochambeau for who
Yes.
gets to pick that. Okay, here's the question. I've recently been told that I'm a rescuer. Can you define the difference between supporting and rescuing? I believe I give support when asked for help.
Yeah.
I think this is all about trust. I'd love to hear your take on it, and then I'll share a take on it, and then we'll probably be at our time.
Yeah. Well, I think that the difference between rescuing somebody and supporting somebody is really figuring out, asking them if they've got it. I'm just thinking about just going back to my kids, and like you can see someone's really struggling, but I think it's in. So where I mess up is when I assume that they actually need for me to help, but we didn't negotiate it. I think there's just a place to stop and say, hey, listen, I know that, for example, you're a couple days late on that due out. What kind of a role do you need for me to be able to help you there? I'm still expecting this on time. You need my help, or you got it? And I just think that there's that like little pause where you can, ask the question. You're recognizing that you see the struggle.
You're creating like this pause that says, I'm not going to jump to the conclusion that you need my
Right.
help, that you're not capable.
Yeah, and you're still communicating that you want to hold them accountable, which is a critical part of not rescuing people, is holding people accountable for the outcome. So you're still saying, hey, listen, you're not getting where I need you to get, and I can see that you're struggling, but do you want to see this through, or are you needing more help?
I like it. Well, one thing I would add to that is, I think when we rescue, we do it, and the mindset behind it is, I don't trust you to get this done. Like, I don't think you can do it without me. I've got to come in and do heavy lifting on this. Like, you can thank me. I'm giving you a solution rather than sympathy.
Yeah.
Now, I think if we are supporting someone, our messaging is, and our mindset behind that and belief is, I trust you. I'm here to back you up. I'm here to cheer you on rather than receive a thank you.
Yeah.
And you're getting my sympathy and understanding and help if needed rather than a solution.
Yeah.
And so I think when we are in those moments where like, am I rescuing or am I supporting? I would encourage us to stop and say, what is my assumption?
Yeah.
Is it an assumption of trust?
Yeah.
Or really do I not
you're kind of like
trust them to get this done?
You're kind of like fishing out if the real truth is you've got a diminishing assumption about this individual.
You got to go back and check your assumption on this. And again, I think that all of these scenarios are really about trust. What do we do when we come into a situation when trust has been eroded?
Yeah.
How do we build it? Like a little almond slice at a time, almost like we're training killer whales to jump up and do things. How do you build the trust so that people trust you with the high value, work as a contributor? And how do you help people without assuming that you can't trust them to get it done?
Thanks, Liz. Hey, this has been fun to be with you all today. Thanks for your questions. It's guided today's session. It's brought us to trust. It's been good for us to reflect on this with you. We've really enjoyed it. Here's where we're going to go. This is the third of 3 just kind of alpha tests, really, if you will, on this show. We're going to ask you if you would like to see this show continue into the next year, and what little changes you'd encourage us to make, or if there's things that we're doing well, to double click on those to let us know to do more of those. We don't have a date yet, but we will be offering some date. If you all think and we hear that this needs to continue, which we hope that that's the feedback that we get, I'm not going to lie about that. But we will then share with you the date on how we go forward, but kind of much of the same. We're going to do little teeny shifts. Our goal is to be able to listen to find out what leadership matters you're struggling with, so we can try to bring together the best thinking that we have access to make a difference for you. And here's our point of view, is that leadership matters. It matters, as we think back about what we've talked about, it matters to every single person on our team. They need a leader that they can trust in order for them to play big. And that's what contributors want. They want to show up and do something awesome. And it's in leadership that that oftentimes the conditions are created to be able to do this. We've enjoyed being with you. Thank you so very much. We feel lucky to be able to be connected with you all, and wish you the very best. Happy holidays this season and a wonderful new year. Thank you.